tell me this is the Orville.
This is the Orville.
The Orville.
The Orville Gibson
The Orville.
Mandolin.
With the wildest case ever.
And the nice homemade case.
Non-original. So we got that neck repaired.
1898. New old stock tuners.
I have got to play
plays
it.
like $1 million. Orville would be so proud.
I bet he would.
Wow. Mr. Orville might have known what he was doing there.
Well, I tell you what, Mr. Orville was a great craftsman, and this is a prime example of one of his mandolins from 1898. The patent year, he applied for the patents in 1894 for the A and the F model mandolin, granted those patents in 1898, and that is the patent date, February 1st, 1898. On the label, cool. Handwritten by Orville himself.
Yeah, I was told that the reason it's slanted kind of to the left is he was left-handed. So that's why it came.
But the pictures show that he played right-handed. Built left-handed, I'm sure, but quite the innovative mandolin. Of course, Orville sawed the rims out of one piece of wood. The neck and the rims were one piece of wood with a slab part here. The neck is hollow. There's a pass-through, hollowed to about the 5th fret on that mandolin.
So this is one of those hollow neck
that's
mandolins.
Hollow neck, and they call pan back. You can see it. It's kind of halfway between furniture and a mandolin.
Yes.
And I can only imagine when this came out of the case in 1898. Around taterbug mandolins that were the standard of the day with the mandolin orchestras that just blew everybody out of the room.
Yeah. And
immediately the demand for Gibson mandolins and Gibson guitars.
So yeah, up to this point they were mostly that taterbug back, but almost a flat top on all of them. It's slight arch there to give it more support,
bent top.
Yeah, bent. But then going into this carved more like a violin build is
that
where
was
the
Orville's
inspiration
innovation was to implement violin technology into mandolins and guitars with a carved and graduated top and back. And that is kind of a combination of a few different things that ended up changing a little bit later on when we went into full manufacture in 1902. But this is
pre-actual Gibson being bought and having the investors involved and actually making it a factory brand. This was actually just Orville building it as an Orville Gibson master instrument.
One at a time, and as the story goes, Mandolin Orchestra wanted to try to order 100 Gibson mandolins, and Orville Gibson said it would be $100 a piece and take 100 years. So a group of investors heard that story and decided to invest in Orville Gibson and his name and pay him a royalty for his name, the use of his name, keep him on as an advisor throughout the early years of Gibson, and then basically implement manufactured techniques like a little automobile company up the road in Dearborn named Ford.
Yeah.
And they implemented that manufacturing technique into the mandolins and guitars. And literally within about 5 or 6 years, they moved to about 800 instruments a year.
Wow. And that's, I mean, like I said, going from him just building himself to that almost factory style, following his inspiration. And then the cool thing about this is just the historic nature of this instrument. There aren't that many known to actually be built by Orville himself.
Very few. Now, Jeremy, how did you fellas here at the Acoustic Shop end up with this mandolin?
You know this, since we opened the store, we've just been blessed, I think being in this part of the country too, of just having some really historic instruments walk in the door without any planning. Like this one, a customer's daughter put a banjo in on consignment, and so we put that up to sell, and he said, well, I have this really old Gibson that I'd love to show you guys. So he came in a couple days later with this, and as soon as I saw it, I knew, and I got on the phone with you right away, sending text messages and photos saying, this is the oldest Gibson I have seen, and definitely, you know, it doesn't actually have the Gibson stamp brand, so I knew it was production, yes. Right. And then we had talked some in the past about, you know, the inland, the headstock that he most likely, he had a Turkish
pearl cutter, and that's why you see the crescent moon and stars. But it's a recurring theme up into about 1907, 1908, I think, about the time that you see
that's kind of how I knew it was in that era. And he had told you the story, John.
Yeah, and again, I don't know how much truth there is to this story or not, but what he had told me was he bought this in a yard sale in the 70s. Now, he was in Kalamazoo and just running around. He's actually, I believe, from Wisconsin. Was running around, found this yard sale, and this guy was looking at another violin or something, and he goes, "You should go around the corner. There's another yard sale just around the corner, and he's got some cool stuff." So he went over and found this, and when he was there, he is talking to the fella, and again, I don't know how true the story is, but the guy who sold it to him said he was a friend of Orville's. Now,
very old gentleman.
it was an older gentleman that supposedly was an actual friend of it, and he said before he ended up leaving, he ended up, the story of him having to, go to the mental institute at the time. Before he did that, he was kind of dispersing a lot of his personal belongings, and since they were friends, he said, "Hey, here's a mandolin that I have. If you wouldn't mind, I'd love to give this to you and get it." Now, whether that's the truth or not, I have no way of proving that, but it's a cool story either way. And if it really is that case, that's really awesome.
Well, and it sounds like it's confirmed piece found in Kalamazoo, Michigan, at the very least.
Yep.
Which is in and of itself a great story.
Yeah.
And another thing that he brought up, it can't necessarily be proven, obviously, but there's like one photo of Orville's bench that is kind of known to be in existence. And he's got a few of his mandolins hanging on that wall, still in production. And there's one that looks eerily like this. Obviously, like we've mentioned, this crescent moon and star is on a lot of them, but it was the same, more plain design. Most of his, he had really ornate inlays in the pick guard.
Plus that bridge shape is so unique. That's what I think is really kind of makes that kind of pop.
Well, and you look at that, and we have a tremendous carver on staff at the Gibson Custom Shop. And I took this in the other day on some of the pictures that I sent you that were on Facebook. And I called him over and I said, "Now, if you have any doubts at all that Orville had his chops as not only a great luthier, but a great carver, take a look at that bridge right there."
It's pretty awesome.
And that sets that to rest. I mean,
the symmetry
truly,
of it blew me away. Like on all those curls, they're the same on both sides. I mean, that takes a good, skilled.
That's highly skilled, and it speaks to me that there is a lot of violin maker background there. Orville was listed in the early Kalamazoo registry at about 1900 as a violin maker. And then it was luthier and mandolin and guitar builder later. So at some point, and you do see from that same picture of his workbench, you see violins and violin forms hanging on the wall, along with the mandolin very much like this, and the form for the mandolaire, which is a layer-shaped mandolin, which is on all the Orville label.
Which is such a cool-looking instrument.
But the features on this mandolin are not only the bridge, but the heavy carve, which is much more Stainer-esque than Guarneri or Stradivarian type of
really nice curves to it.
Very nice curves, and all this work is just so beautiful. The symmetry is just is amazing. The radius of the fingerboard very much like a violin radius, which is very much different. People say, ask me all the time, why don't you do radius fingerboards? Well, we do. Well, when did you start that? Like 1890s,
The beginning?
in 1894, Orville Gibson was building very much like a violin, and which tells you, the steep angle of the peg head is much more violin-esque, and then the beautiful volute on the back of the neck for strength and rigidity, but it is a slab piece, and also a piece of koa as a head veneer overlay on the front overlay, which is gorgeous. I mean, the mandolin is incredible condition for a mandolin that's 124 years old, and it sounds tremendous.
When we went to string it up, I noticed that this volute was split, and it had been repaired once in the past, but as soon as I put tension on it, I was like, I'm going to get this to David and let him fix that. So why don't you walk us through a few of the things you did once it got in your hands? Obviously,
well, I did fix the volute, and
so finally could string it up and hear it, which is just incredible.
I've repaired a top center seam crack that were actually where the seam was open there. There was a seam open back here, and I didn't want to go, it's always about preservation on an instrument like this rather than some kind of restoration, which would be full-blown and trying to get rid of any wear. And that's the beautiful thing about this mandolin. It shows the natural wear, which is very little for a 124-year-old instrument. But I glued seams that were open. This pineapple tailpiece is a replacement. I would guess it went back to the factory, and it's a very early version of the pineapple tailpiece with 5 screws, and the hole, nobody knows what that's for. But it's very cool. Hand preened hand-cut string tines that hold the strings on.
That's something I noticed when we first got it in. You could see where the strings once laid on the top of the mandolin because it's got marks for all those. So it probably had quite a bit different, almost like one of those.
It had like a little shell
tailpiece, yeah.
one-piece tailpiece that the strings actually came across, and I actually felted both the bottom side where it wouldn't rattle against the top. But the fact that it's a cedar top, it is walnut back, sides, and neck, and the like I mentioned before, the rims in the neck are one piece, and then a slab peg head. The neck is slab. It's actually a three-piece neck on this mandolin, but the block, there's no blocks, linings, or braces. That was in the 1903 catalog. No blocks, linings, or braces to impede the sound of the instrument.
That's awesome.
And the hollow neck was to give the instrument a bell-like tone in the upper registers. So it's even down to the original nut, still on the mandolin.
The only thing you did end up having to replace the tuners because the ones that obviously 100-year-old machined tuners, a couple of them were worn out where you couldn't.
Completely, and those were 124-year-old brass cogs. These are steel. These are a little later, but I picked these up off of eBay about 30 years ago. So disappointed when I got them because they wouldn't fit anything, and I just stuck them in a box, and lo and behold,
they were waiting for this one. This is what they were waiting for.
Waiting for this, totally a God thing there. That these tuners slipped in, and with a little bit of adjustment, I had to grind them where they go around that volute.
Which that was done on the original ones too. I remember seeing that you had to take the edges off there to fit that volute.
Very common that we would change that plate shape where it would match the peg head and go around the volutes. But other than that, I refit the bridge a bit. It had a shim under it. I just refit it a bit, and it's working. Everything works, and it sounds great.
Yeah, it's just an incredible thing.
One other
Orville
thing,
himself built this and played it.
Oh yeah, 124 years ago, and probably started 125 years ago because he built one at a time.
Yeah, sure.
But the walnut is an interesting story. I
was going to ask you about this. I've heard a story about the walnut on the back here, and I'm thinking this is where you're going to go with this.
That's
So I'll
exactly
let you.
where I'm going. There was a church that was torn down in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Orville being Orville, he used whatever he could get a hold of for materials, and they had walnut church pews in this church, and he got a bunch of that wood and built almost entirely from that walnut from that church, and I believe that's this was a church pew, so somebody's behind set on this.
Somebody's hired in, worked that one in for a while.
Absolutely.
I had read that might have been one of the appeals of him going to Kalamazoo. There's so many furniture builders up there. He had almost an unlimited supply of scrap wood that he would take advantage of and use to build a lot of these very unique instruments that, I mean, the mandolin and the changes he made to this is only one of the innovations. His harp guitars were like just crazy innovative, and that lute. Have you ever played one of those?
The mandolute,
Yeah.
I've not
They look
played,
incredible.
or the mandolaire.
Yeah.
I've never seen one in person. There are only two actual examples known, and then a third that's a copy. But the harp guitars are amazing. Our CEO just bought a harp guitar from the Franklin Guitar Show, and kind of whispered that to me yesterday.
That's pretty awesome.
And I was excited. I want to see it. So that's the great thing. We built a lot of instruments to fuel the mandolin orchestra craze from the late 1890s through the end of World War I. And we built a lot of great instruments. Orville built great instruments. Just wonderful to see a prime example of his work still in existence and now playable.
It's a great example of why it is a legendary brand, and the name Gibson lives on forever because he was so innovative in his build, his ideas, and his just the quality of the instrument.
Absolutely.
Just great to actually have one in our hands.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, David, for bringing it in and getting it fixed all the way up for us again,
I'm
too.
going to play it for hours now.
Appreciate that.
That's awesome. Let's go play something with it.
All right. Well, we're back with the Orville Gibson A model mandolin from 1898, patented February the 1st, 1898. And it's such a beautiful mandolin. It inspired me to kind of go back and find a big hit from 1898. And I found this old tune called the Georgia Camp Meeting. And it's a fun little tune, and it's difficult to play, but it sounds real simple. Little ragtime piece. And here we go. Ready? Good job.
That was awesome.
And we really appreciate you guys watching that video. It was my favorite one we've made so far. We've done hundreds of videos, and that was the best one.
It was.
And the next one's going to be even better. If you'd like to see that, be sure you subscribe to this channel. And also, the more you comment and interact below, the more the YouTube algorithms pick it up and start pushing it out to other people, like-minded people.
Algorithms?
Algorithms, they're everywhere. They permeate the internet, and YouTube's got one. And it watches our videos, and it sees how much you comment, and then it pushes us to other people like you. And we want everyone to experience the Acoustic Shop world, where we talk about instruments, we do reviews, we got some fun videos coming up. We thank you guys so much for being a part of it, and we'll see you in the next video.